Hello. Today GH spoilers will tease her. Ever since she lost custody of Wiley and Amelia, Willow descended into a state of mental collapse so profound that it blurred the line between rational thought and the distorted emotions of a mother cornered by loss. She no longer operated within the realm of reason. Instead, her every move became governed by a deep and festering desperation, a need to reclaim what she believed had been unfairly taken from her. At first, Michael still held onto a fragile thread of compassion for the woman who had once been his partner, the mother of his children, the person with whom he had shared dreams of family and stability. He had hoped that time and distance might help her find healing. But Willow was not interested in healing. She was interested in reclaiming. And she was willing to bend reality to achieve it. She began appearing in places she had no legal right to be. Quietly, almost like a shadow, she slipped past security measures and crept into the Quartermain estate. She would sit near Daisy's crib for hours, not daring to touch her at first, simply watching, whispering cryptic lullabies of loss, betrayal, and pain. These moments, private and unsettling, escalated from silent vigils to increasingly deranged monologues. Willow projected her bitterness onto the infant, muttering that Sasha had stolen her place, that Michael had destroyed their family, and that Daisy, sweet, innocent Daisy, was hers. She didn't just observe anymore, she began to manipulate. With eerie precision, she planted subtle inconsistencies in Sasha's routine, switched outfits on the baby, and left behind traces that would make even the most stable new mother question her own sanity. What began as an emotional unraveling evolved into something more insidious, a carefully layered attempt to make others doubt Sasha's mental health. The breaking point came on a night drenched in storm and silence. Daisy vanished. Panic spread through the household, alarms triggered, security called. No one knew where she was. Sasha, already on edge from Willow's gaslighting, broke down. But it was Michael who found her. Curled up in a storage room of the hospital, wrapped in an unfamiliar blanket, alone and trembling. Willow had taken her there, whispering in the shadows, pretending to be the only comfort the child needed. The chilling truth settled in Michael's bones like a sickness. This was no longer a grieving mother acting out. This was a woman who had crossed into dangerous delusion. For Michael, this was beyond forgiveness. He had covered for Willow once, even twice. Ignoring her trespasses, quieting her name in whispers of court violations, and pleading with Sasha to hold off on involving law enforcement. But seeing his daughter left cold and frightened in an abandoned room was a betrayal he couldn't bury. The surveillance footage was damning, hours of video showing Willow sneaking in, holding the baby, speaking to her in tones both soothing and unhinged. With that in hand, Michael went to Mac and handed over everything. He signed the complaint himself. Child endangerment, unlawful entry, and psychological harm. It was not vengeance. It was protection. For Daisy. For Wiley. For Amelia. For a future where his children could grow without fear. Willow was blindsided. She had believed Michael was her last protector, the only soul left who might still see her as a mother, not a threat. But he had turned, and this time, he wasn't shielding her from the consequences. The court mandated a full psychiatric evaluation. Willow was placed under observation at Ferncliff, where the doctors quickly detected signs of dissociative identity disorder, splintered thoughts, fragmented realities, and an inability to accept the finality of her loss. Her episodes became more erratic. She would alternate between moments of eerie calm and frenzied denial. She spoke of Daisy as though the child were still in her arms, as though the night of the disappearance had never ended. Doctors tried to reach her, to unearth the trauma that had triggered this fracture, but Willow resisted. She insisted she was not sick, only misunderstood. To her, taking Daisy had never been wrong. It had been an act of love. In her distorted mind, she had only been reclaiming what had been stolen. She believed she could still be a mother if she just held on long enough. But the reality was brutal. The legal system moved swiftly. The court stripped Willow of all parental rights and placed a permanent 5-year restraining order, barring her from any contact with her children. The judge's gavel wasn't just a legal conclusion, it was the sound of a door slamming shut on a chapter she would never reopen. In Ferncliff, time became meaningless for Willow. Her days blurred together in a haze of medication and locked doors. Sometimes, she sat by the window, whispering to herself, cradling a pillow as if it were Daisy. Her world had shrunk to a small room, her hopes sealed behind glass, her voice drowned beneath the weight of consequences she never thought would reach her. In those rare moments of lucidity, she would cry, not for herself, but for a life that would never be again. She had lost her children, not just to a court ruling, but to her own unraveling. Meanwhile, Sasha emerged from the ordeal stronger. Though the trauma lingered, she began to piece together the remnants of her identity. Michael remained stoic, his pain hidden beneath the calm resolve of a father forced to make impossible choices. But he never regretted turning Willow in. Love, no matter how deep, could not excuse the endangerment of a child. And in the corridors of Port Charles, where so many battles are fought in silence and shadows, Michael had made the hardest decision of his life, not to save Willow, but to save his family from her. Meanwhile, Sasha, who had once been falsely accused and publicly shamed with the label of postpartum psychosis, slowly but surely began reclaiming her dignity, her strength, and her rightful place as a mother. The surveillance footage that Michael turned over not only exonerated her but painted a painfully clear picture of just how deeply she had been manipulated and gaslit by Willow's carefully orchestrated spiral into madness. What the world had once interpreted as signs of Sasha's fragility were now, through the lens of truth, revealed to be the cracks left behind by someone else's calculated cruelty. The shifting diapers, the changed baby outfits, the odd placements of toys, these were not accidents of a sleep-deprived mother, but deliberate acts designed to destabilize her. In a society all too ready to doubt a woman in the aftermath of childbirth, Sasha had nearly lost her mind not because of her own instability, but because she had been targeted in silence. But instead of seeking revenge or demanding retribution, Sasha chose a different path. The betrayal she had endured, by a woman who once shared her grief, once stood beside her in the name of motherhood, could have embittered her soul. And yet, she found it in herself to focus on healing. She poured her energy into therapy, both individual and maternal, learning how to process the trauma of not only nearly losing her daughter but also being made to believe that she was the danger. She allowed herself to feel rage, but refused to let it consume her. Her love for Daisy became her anchor. Every sleepless night, every cautious smile that Daisy gave her, every moment of peace reclaimed in the nursery served as both a reminder of what she had almost lost and a promise that she would never allow herself to be broken again. In the wake of the revelation, Mac, deeply disturbed by the extent of Willow's intrusion and its implications, acted swiftly in his role as chief of police. He doubled the security at the Quartermain estate, ordering additional patrols, installing new surveillance systems, and stationing a discreet but vigilant protection detail around the property. Mac was not merely protecting Daisy, he was sending a message to the entire community. The justice system in Port Charles would not waver, not even when the perpetrator was someone as once beloved and tragic as Willow. The innocence of a child would not be gambled with again. Shortly thereafter, the family court issued its final and most severe judgment against Willow. After weighing psychiatric evaluations, testimonies, and evidence, including damning footage, medical reports, and witness accounts, the judge ruled that Willow would be permanently barred from contact with any of her biological children for a minimum of 5 years. The court made it explicitly clear that even if Willow showed signs of psychological improvement or made claims of recovery, no future visitation, no calls, no letters, and no third-party contact would be permitted unless the court reconvened and approved an exception under extraordinary circumstances. In legal terms, it was protection. In emotional terms, it was a death sentence for a mother's bond. The gravity of the ruling hung heavy in the courtroom. For Sasha, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but the scars would remain. She held Daisy close as the gavel struck, her fingers gently brushing her daughter's hair, silently vowing that no harm would ever come to her again. For Michael, the moment offered no relief, only solemn acceptance. He had made the right choice, but the weight of that choice would follow him for the rest of his life. And for Willow, confined to Ferncliff, isolated and increasingly withdrawn. The news was delivered by her court-appointed guardian. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply turned her face away and stared at the wall for hours, her eyes glassy and unblinking. Perhaps in that moment, the reality finally broke through, the truth that she had not just lost a custody battle, not just committed a legal offense, but that she had shattered every bridge that once connected her to the very children she claimed to love. For Willow, the court's ruling wasn't just a punishment under the law. It was the cruelest of all punishments, to remain alive, and yet be completely erased from the lives of those who once called her mother. Michael, though every fiber of his being recoiled at the necessity of what he had done, remained steadfast in his decision, a decision that would forever alter not only Willow's life but his own. He was not driven by rage, nor did he find any solace in punishing the woman who had once held his heart. What moved him now was something far more sobering and absolute, the unflinching knowledge that some acts of love, twisted by grief and denial, could become catastrophic if left unchallenged. He had watched for months as Willow slowly deteriorated, her words becoming more fragmented, her actions less tethered to reality, her judgment increasingly clouded by emotional delusions masked as maternal instinct. He had hoped, even prayed, that she would find her way back from the edge. But in the end, what she did was not just a cry for help, it was an alarm bell Michael could no longer ignore. He had tried. God, he had tried. He had spoken to her gently, visited her out of court order, even pleaded with Sasha to extend empathy at moments when Willow's behavior was bordering on erratic. He had shielded her from reports and investigators, deflecting blame, convincing himself that she was simply grieving, that she needed time. He had given her chances, so many chances, that now, in retrospect, it haunted him to think how close he had come to enabling a disaster. But then Daisy disappeared. That one act shattered every illusion he had fought to preserve. Finding his daughter cold and frightened, hidden away in a forgotten room by the very woman who once swore to protect her, left Michael no room to maneuver. Love could no longer be an excuse. Compassion, however deep, could no longer come before justice. In the days that followed, Michael carried the weight of his choice like a leaden stone in his chest. He moved with quiet determination, delivering security footage to Mac, working with his legal team to ensure every line of the restraining order was airtight, every protection measure enforced. But when he was alone, the grief crept in. Not just the grief of what had happened, but of what was lost, forever. He grieved not only for his daughter's trauma or for Sasha's suffering, but for the family that once was, now irreparably fractured. He grieved for the woman Willow used to be. Vibrant, grounded, tender. He could still picture her laughing with Wiley on a summer day, holding Amelia against her chest while humming lullabies. That woman was gone, replaced by someone he no longer recognized, someone who had become a stranger not only to him but to herself. Still, Michael did not allow himself to waver. Because in his heart, he knew the deepest tragedy was not that Willow had lost her children, but that she had lost herself long before the courts confirmed it. She had become consumed by a need to feel whole again, and in that desperation, she tried to reclaim what had slipped through her fingers by controlling what remained. She didn't understand that true motherhood was not about possession, it was about presence, about stability, about safeguarding your children even from your own brokenness. And when Willow violated that sacred role, when she used her grief as a weapon instead of seeking help, she forfeited the right to call herself a mother in the eyes of the law, and, more heartbreakingly, in the eyes of those who once loved her. Michael's resolve was not born from cruelty. It was born from a harrowing maturity, the kind no parent should ever be forced to embrace. He knew he was condemning Willow to a fate worse than prison. To be alive and aware, yet forever exiled from the lives of the children who once gave her meaning. She would not be there for Daisy's first words, nor Amelia's first recital, nor Wiley's graduation. She would become a ghost in the narrative of their lives, a name rarely spoken, a face that faded with each passing year. And the world, harsh as it could be, would continue to turn without her. The court's ruling had been final, but it was Michael who delivered the emotional verdict. The kind that no judge could decree. When he signed the affidavit confirming his full support for the 5-year ban, he did so with trembling hands, but with unshakable conviction. Because he knew that the ultimate measure of love is sometimes the courage to let go, not to abandon, but to protect. He let go of Willow not out of hatred, but because he refused to allow her brokenness to fracture the lives of their children any further. In the quiet hours that followed, when the lawyers had left, when Sasha had finally tucked Daisy into bed and the house was silent except for the hum of the monitors, Michael stood in the doorway of the nursery and watched his daughter sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell with the fragile rhythm of peace hard won. And in that stillness, he whispered an unspoken promise to her and to himself. That no matter how much it cost him, he would always choose her safety over sentiment, her future over nostalgia. Port Charles was a place where love often turned violent, where loyalty could become a liability, and where those you trusted most could become your undoing. But for Michael, this was not about legacy, nor pride, nor even justice in the traditional sense. This was about knowing that real love sometimes demands sacrifice. And as he turned away from the crib that night, he didn't feel victorious. He felt the weight of a man who had sentenced a woman to loneliness not out of malice, but out of necessity, a man who had chosen the light, even when it meant walking through the darkest valley alone. And so, beneath the gray, unrelenting sky that seemed to mirror the sorrow hanging over Port Charles, the fallout from Willow's actions settled into place like dust over a battlefield, quiet, heavy, and irreversible. The chapter that followed was not marked by public spectacle or grand revelations, but by the aching stillness that comes after a storm has passed and left behind nothing but ruin. Willow, once a symbol of quiet strength and maternal devotion, now sat isolated in a secure wing of Ferncliff, surrounded not by her children's laughter or the warmth of family but by white walls, locked doors, and the constant hum of fluorescent lights. Her days blurred together into a numb haze of medication, evaluations, and routine observations. And yet, no external punishment could rival the punishment she now lived with internally, a punishment rooted not in what had been done to her, but in what she had done to others, and what she had irrevocably lost in the process. She no longer had the privilege of hearing Wiley call her "mommy," or of watching Amelia reach for her hand with innocent trust. Daisy, the child she had tried so desperately to possess as a symbol of something reclaimed, would never know her as anything more than a cautionary name spoken in whispers. The court ruling had been clear: no contact, no correspondence, no exceptions. And while legal documents could be challenged or amended over time, what could never be undone was the emotional devastation left behind. Willow was not simply cut off from her children, she was erased from the intimate fabric of their lives. Birthdays would pass without her. School plays, scraped knees, lullabies, and late-night fevers, every moment that defined motherhood would happen without her shadow anywhere near the room. And as much as she tried to tell herself that one day she might return, deep down, a part of her knew that some doors, once closed, are sealed forever. Beyond the walls of Ferncliff, Sasha was also beginning a new chapter, though hers was one forged not from ashes, but from embers that refused to die out. The woman who had once been falsely branded unstable and unfit had reclaimed not only her dignity, but her agency. Each night she sang Daisy to sleep, each time she stood firm in front of reporters, social workers, or even family members still wrestling with doubt, she rebuilt the identity that had been so callously fractured. Healing for Sasha wasn't a destination, it was a relentless, day-by-day process of rising despite the weight of what she'd endured. And she did not allow vengeance to take root, even when it would have been justified. Because unlike Willow, Sasha understood that motherhood was not about controlling or possessing, it was about being present, being steady, being the calm in the chaos. Mac, meanwhile, ensured that the protective boundaries around the Quartermain family remained intact. Under his leadership, Port Charles police enhanced security, not just at the estate, but throughout the town. Willow's breakdown had been a sobering reminder of how easily even the most familiar faces could become threats when grief and instability were left untreated.